we've been looking really across the supply chain at these branded goods, and we've seen that for a number of major brands, for example, baked beans, mayonnaise, pet food, we've seen significant price increases ranging from sort of 25, 30%, sometimes even doubling in price over the last couple of years. And these price increases have been greater than the cost increases that manufacturers have been experiencing.
But you're satisfied that competition is working on these lines because consumers are able to switch to non-branded products?
So for the most part, we've seen that people have been able to switch away to cheaper alternatives, both cheaper branded options, but importantly, also own label options. Now, the exception to that is baby formula, where we've seen high price increases around 25% over the last 2 years, and very little switching to cheaper options, and really very limited availability of own brand in baby formula. And that's obviously a concern for us because this is a really important market for new parents. They want to make sure they're making the best possible choices. And typically when people choose a baby formula product, they tend to stick with it. Now, what we know is that the regulations require that every single baby formula product actually has to meet the same nutritional requirements in terms of a healthy baby's needs. But we want to understand better why effective price competition isn't working well in this market.
Just to go back to something you said just now, I think you said that input costs for manufacturers of baby formula, their prices had been risen by 20%, I think you said. What were their input costs going up by at that time?
So we've seen a significant difference in the input costs and the price increases. The margins are at the highest end of the range for these manufacturers. We're looking at margins in the region of 15 to 30%, which is significantly higher, for example, than own brand manufacturers who typically have margins down below 5%.
Now, the market in baby formula is dominated by two players in this country, Danone and Nestlé. They have about 85% of the market, I think, between them. Do you have remedies if you decide that the market is not acting competitively?
So our priority at the moment is to understand why the market's working in the way it is, in particular, what's driving consumer choices, whether people are getting the right information at the right time to make those choices. We've found that new parents could save around £500 a year by switching to cheaper options. We also want to understand whether there are barriers that are preventing other competitors from growing their market share, why there isn't much in the way of competition from own label products in this market, and also whether there are any elements of the regulatory framework which could be changed to improve the way that the market is working. We're going to do that piece of work over the next few months, and we'll be providing a further update next year.
But in extremis, could you force divestitures by these two companies if you were unsatisfied with the way that the market's operating?
So we're not at this stage launching a formal review, which would result in those sorts of remedies. We want to move quickly in this market. We want to get a good understanding of what's really behind the lack of effective competition. And at that point, we can look at what changes need to be made.
Now, separately, of course, you're going to be looking at loyalty schemes in supermarkets as well. What's piqued your interest there?
Yeah, so what we've seen, obviously, loyalty schemes have been around for a long time in the retail sector. What we've seen over the last few months is an increase in the trend for a number of supermarkets to make their pricing promotions available only to customers if they're signing up for loyalty schemes. Now, there's a number of potential issues we want to look at. Does that mean that consumers are not getting access to the best offers on some of these really important products? Does it mean that people are having to part with important data, and how are supermarkets going to be using that data? Does it mean that some people are simply excluded from getting access to those promotions altogether? And one interesting thing we've heard from the manufacturers is that as their costs are decreasing, they're not planning to pass those cost reductions through in list price reductions. They're planning to try to win back business by offering price promotions. And if we combine that with what the supermarkets are doing, we want to make sure that that's really going to offer the best deals for shoppers.
And when do you expect to launch this review? You said early next year?
Absolutely. So we'll be launching that in January and again reporting on that in the course of the first part of next year.